The attic had always been a place Lorraine avoided. At 70 years old, she'd lived alone in the house she and her late husband Arthur had built together over 4 decades ago. The home was a quiet testament to their life. Creaky floors that remembered laughter, faded wallpaper that once bore witness to Christmas lights, family portraits, and long-forgotten birthday decorations. After Arthur passed 12 years ago, Lorraine sealed parts of the house away, unable to face the memories that clung to certain corners, especially the attic. It was early spring when the roof began to leak. Rain tapped at the ceiling like a persistent child begging to be noticed. The roofer insisted he'd need access to the attic to inspect the beams. Lorraine, reluctant and stiff in her joints, climbed the narrow wooden stairs she hadn't touched in over a decade. The air was thick with dust and silence. Sunlight filtered through the single attic window, casting rays across old trunks, draped furniture, and boxes long ignored. As she stepped forward, something caught her eye. A small leather-bound book tucked between 2 beams. The diary was brittle at the edges, the cover worn smooth by time. She opened it with trembling hands. The handwriting inside was elegant and slanted, belonging to someone named M.E. The first entry was dated March 14, 1956. Today he smiled at me again. I pretended not to notice, but inside, I felt like the sun had risen just for me. Lorraine read for hours, sitting on an overturned crate, forgetting the roofer waiting outside. The diary was not just a teenage girl's musings. It was a window into another life, full of longing, curiosity, and self-discovery. Me was playful, introspective, and often insecure. She wrote about a boy named Thomas, who played piano at church. She wrote about sneaking out to dance alone in the woods. She wrote about the pressure to be proper, to be quiet, to be small. Each entry unraveled the voice of a woman who'd never truly been heard. Lorraine found herself waiting for quiet evenings to return to the attic, where she could continue reading. It became a ritual. She brewed a cup of chamomile tea, brought a blanket, and sat for hours with Emmy's words. The woman in the diary was vivid, brave, and deeply uncertain of her worth, so different and yet so similar to Lorraine. One entry struck her deeply. I wonder what I'll be when I'm old. Will I be alone? Will I still remember who I am? Lorraine closed the book and stared at the dusty rafters above her. She'd never truly asked herself that question. After Arthur died, she became a shadow of who she was. She stopped painting. She withdrew from friends. Her daughters called, but she rarely answered. She told herself she was tired, but it was more than that. She'd stopped believing she had something left to offer the world. But this diary, this voice of a stranger from 70 years ago, whispered something different. One night, Lorraine lit a candle and brought her sketchbook up to the attic. She hadn't drawn anything in years. Her hand was slow at first, rusty, but the lines came. She drew Amy as she imagined her, a girl in a simple dress, dancing barefoot under moonlight, wind in her hair. She cried while drawing, not out of sadness, but because she could feel herself returning. Over time, Lorraine began writing letters to Amy in a journal of her own. She answered the diary entries as if in conversation. You were never small. You were fire. You were wild in the best way. And yes, you'll remember. Even if it takes time. She read aloud from the diary at her community center's storytelling night. She joined a watercolor class at the local library. She began replying to her daughter's texts again. Her world, once muted and still, now pulsed with gentle life. The attic, no longer a place of shadows, had become her sanctuary. Months later, a young woman knocked at her door, an archivist from the Historical Society. She'd been cataloging old town records and heard about Lorraine's discovery. She asked if she could read the diary. Lorraine invited her in and made tea. They sat in the living room, and Lorraine handed her the fragile book with care. The young woman opened it, and after reading the name on the inside cover, her eyes welled up. M.E., she whispered. That was my grandmother's sister. She disappeared in 1958. We never knew what happened to her. Lorraine's breath caught. The diary wasn't just a story. It was a thread connecting past to present. It had found its way home. Later that night, Lorraine sat at her kitchen table and wrote a final letter to Me. Thank you for waking me up. Thank you for your voice. Wherever you are, I hope you danced until your last breath.